Hello Saints, welcome in for another midweek video. I was thinking recently, I don't remember when, but the thought came to me about misplaced faith. And that oftentimes, especially we who call ourselves charismatics and those who believe in and practice the gifts of the Spirit and the power of God and the supernatural display of God, obviously, we don't live in all of that, but we believe in that and we expect that. Sometimes our faith becomes founded upon what God does for us, and in some cases, or what He doesn't do for us. And when God doesn't come through, quote unquote, the way we expect Him to, then our faith wavers. It occurred to me that this is because we have misplaced our faith. About 17 years ago, I wrote a Kernels of Truth teaching newsletter entitled Faith in God, Period. And I was dealing with this issue then as well. And I'm just going to go over some of the ideas from that newsletter from the year 2008 because they're still applicable today. It's easy for us as believers in Jesus Christ that we would place our faith on what God can and will do rather than placing our faith in God Himself. If, when things don't happen the way you think they should, if you have a faith crisis, a faith issue, then you have misplaced faith. If our faith is in God Himself, then no matter what happens, our faith remains the same. You might say, I have faith for my healing, or I have faith for a miracle. Well, where is your faith? Is your faith in the healing or the healer? Is your faith in the miracle or the miracle worker? There's a difference. Because if we're just going to have faith for my healing, then my focus is on my healing. But if I'm going to have faith in God, my focus is on God Himself and let Him take care of my healing. We ask ourselves the question, can we trust God? And can we place our trust in God Himself, period, and allow Him to be God regardless of what He does or does not do in our lives? Now, I'm going to insert real quickly here. God does plenty in our lives. Sometimes we have to turn and look backwards to see the trail where he has shown up, He's done things, He's prevented things. Sometimes we don't know in the moment how much He really is showing up in our lives. And He does things for us. He does heal us. He does perform miracles. He causes things to happen that are only supernatural. But our faith cannot rest on whether or not those occur. Our faith rests in God Himself. We need to find a place that we can have a simple faith in what I'll call a complex God with nothing else attached, nothing else going along. I have got to have faith in God, period. I need to put my trust in God and not what He can do for me. If my faith is conditional upon some action by Him, then, as I said earlier, my faith is just misplaced. When I pray, do I believe God will act? Yes. When I pray, do I believe God moves? Yes. But is my faith in the action and the movement? And is my faith based on the action and the movement? Or is it based on God Himself? Simon Peter experienced a little crisis of faith. Jesus came to him and said, hey, by the way, Satan paid me a visit and he has asked permission to sift you. In other words, to put you through the ringer. He said, I prayed for you, and here's what I prayed, that your faith may not fail. Jesus knows that when we go through a ringer, and sometimes it's the enemy putting us through a ringer, He knows we have a tendency for our faith to waver. because if it does, that means we've placed it in the wrong place. Notice that Jesus didn't tell Peter or pray for Peter to escape the circumstances. He didn't tell Peter, Satan asked permission to sift you, but I told him no. He didn't say that. He said, I prayed that your faith wouldn't fail. He prayed that this faith would be able to carry him to the other side of this storm, because his faith was not in the deliverance from the circumstances, but his faith was in the God of the circumstances. If your faith is in God himself, you can go through anything. You can endure anything. And it's funny that Jesus, he knew Peter was going to fail, because he said, now, when you have turned again, or when once you have turned back, when you've repented, when you've come back, strengthen your brothers. In other words, when you've gone through the ringer and you have failed, help your brothers in such a way that they don't have to go through the same thing you did. Faith in God. How do we handle the why? All of us want to ask the question, why? Why did that happen? Why did that not happen? Why did he say that? Why did she go there? Why did God allow this to happen in my life? We deal with that. We're human beings. On the one hand, that's normal. On the other hand, we can't let the whys, W-H-Y, govern our lives. Don't forget that Jesus was hanging on the cross and he had a why. Why have you forsaken me? Most people, including myself, believe it was at that moment that he had become sin for mankind. And because of that, there was a disfellowship between him and the Father. There was a separation between Jesus and the Father during that moment, because the Father could not look upon sin. Obviously, he was 3 days later was vindicated by being raised from the dead. But in that moment, Jesus said, why? Why have you forsaken me? But we don't need to miss how Jesus handled his why. We don't need to miss, after he got through saying why, excuse me, first of all, we notice that he didn't allow his why, his question, to alter his mission and his purpose. If he had been governed by his why, by his question mark, he himself said, I could have called 10,000 angels, really more than that. I could have called a legion of angels, and they'd have taken care of business. So he could have said, well, if you're not going to explain to me why, then I'm going to take care of business myself. But he didn't. He stayed on task, and he stayed on mission. Why? Because he had faith in his Father. But here's the other part of how Jesus handled his questioning time. It says, he cried with a loud voice, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. In that moment, when you don't know what's going on, in that moment when life is caving in around you, in that moment when circumstances are causing you to have knots in your stomach, you and I should be able to say, no matter what's going on, I commit myself to you. I commit myself to you. In the midst of separation, in the midst of excruciating pain, in the midst of humiliation, Jesus was able to commit himself to his Father unconditionally. The father of the demoniac son said, I do believe, help my unbelief. Did Jesus want him to believe in his son's deliverance or in him, period? We know the answer to that. When we get everything else off the table and our faith is reduced down to a simple faith in a complex God, it remains to be seen what we can do for the kingdom of God. And we can say with the Apostle Paul, I live by faith in the Son of God. Then we can proclaim that our faith is in God, period. Now may your faith be enlarged and may it grow. And may you have a great week. May you have a great Thanksgiving, and go out there and act like somebody. Good day.